Right, right. Yes. Don't even got to write anything yet. You tend to find larger bodied animals in general in temperate climates than you do in tropical climates. So it's a generalization both within a taxa and then also within species. So, for example, towards the poles, mountain lions get larger. Your Florida panther is much smaller than mountain lions in the northern Rockies, for example. Everyone know the Florida panther story? Okay, so mountain lions used to be distributed throughout the United States. And we hunted mountain lions to extinction throughout the southeastern United States, basically throughout the entire eastern United States, mountain lions were hunted to extinction. They held on. There's some mountain lions in Texas that held on in some of the remote mountainous areas in West Texas. You have mountain lions in the Rockies and in the Sierras, basically. And then we discovered that there was a population of mountain lions in Florida. When we started to drain the Everglades in Florida, we discovered that there was a remnant population of mountain lions in the Everglades. And these guys actually have the ability to, and it's not by choice, it's because they have to. They tend to dwell in the trees. So instead of dwelling in mountains, they actually climb trees. And so they were discovered in the early 1970s, around the time that they were establishing the Endangered Species Act in the United States. And so Florida panthers were listed as endangered. It's a subspecies, so it created some controversy because it's not an actual species. If you look genetically, there's really no difference between a Florida panther and a mountain lion in Colorado. But because it represents a unique subspecies and a unique population, it was afforded protection by the Endangered Species Act. What that actually did, sometimes we call these species like this umbrella species, because you're protecting the Florida panther, but actually more importantly what it did is under the Endangered Species Act, if you list something as threatened or endangered, you have to designate critical habitat, and you have to protect that critical habitat. Well, this critical habitat is the Everglades. So it allowed for the establishment of protection of the Everglades. Otherwise, the Everglades probably would have been completely destroyed and lost as an ecosystem, because South Florida is some of the most valuable real estate in the country. And we've established this huge national park in Southwest Florida that's protected partly because of this mountain species.
So a mountain lion and a panther are the same thing?
Yes.
So the thing in Jungle Book is a mountain lion?
The thing in Jungle Book is, yes, there's no, first of all, black panthers are really rare. It's a melanistic panther, and they're in North America. The Jungle Book, the way Hollywood mixed it up, is wrong in all kinds of ways.
It's going to crush every movie that.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, I brought up Jungle Book. So
right. So, okay, so you have to remember that all of the animals in the Jungle Book is an Indian story. So all of the animals in the Jungle Book have to be from India. There are no grizzly bears in India. There are no black bears in India. There are no black panthers in India. There are sloth bears and sun bears, and there are other cats in India. But what's in those Hollywood movies, the Jungle Book, are all wrong. They're remaking the Jungle Book.
I saw that. It looks so cool.
So my sincere hope is that finally they get it right and they use indigenous Indian mammals for the story. They don't.
Well, no,
I wish that you worked in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So that at least the videos were also informative. Correctly.
Still a black man.
It's still.
So wait, what's the difference in a panther and a jaguar?
Now, jaguar, I think, is probably what.
I can't think of his name. Is it?
Shabar?
I thought that was in Aladdin. That's
just
Jafar.
That's
That's
weird.
Jafar.
Saying they were talking about
Like
this.
this.
One time, Jaguar and stuff.
So Jafar is in Aladdin, but Jafar is the Jaguar. Well, there you go.
Alright, I'm gonna have to watch the trailer and see for
Just know they're
myself
both
how they
similar.
screwed this up.
Oh, for a real question now, sorry.
Okay, for real.
So an umbrella species, you
Yeah.
mentioned that, what?
Umbrella species, from a conservation biology perspective, is one that provides, by protecting that species, you're protecting an entire ecosystem and a lot of other species that depend on that ecosystem.
Dude, I don't think he knew there was that many things in there.
And it's in the outline.
He was like, yeah, just come
Florida panthers.
Dude, the whole
When- Okay, so this
going
is,
around it. You had to get
I'm totally off the subject, I'm gonna come back to here.
true.
I was
But we
telling
had
them.
to do like, we had to do like man.
But that has nothing to do with
No, it actually does.
Okay,
Dude,
so-
legs
Pull
are
back
gone
full
now.
circle, the
Yeah.
Florida panther
It was
is
mostly just
smaller than mountain lions in the Northern Rockies.
the next day I saw him, he had cleaned it and everything, and it was like, they were really small.
But I had to describe what a Florida panther was
I
first.
don't know,
A
like,
Florida
where's
panther
now?
is different than an
Arms
ostrich.
It is a subspecies of mountain lion.
I'm gonna write that down.
I was just fucking
And it's
like,
smaller,
walking through
and it's
straight down
adapted to living in
didn't care.
Everglades.
I actually pulled the thorn out of my hand.
And it's
yesterday.
genetically
I was like,
isolated.
oh shit, what's
So
in
it
my
could
hand?
eventually
Right
become a
here.
separate species. It's genetically isolated because we've killed all of the mountain lions in between the Rockies and Florida, basically.
So it's genetically.
It's genetically isolated from other mountain lion populations. So mountain lions in the Rockies and the Sierras have some, can have some genetic overlap, some relatedness, but not entirely. If you look at house sparrows are the little things that sometimes build nests on your porch, on the eave of your porch. Probably most of you have seen these guys nesting in someone's porch, if not your own. In northern latitudes, they tend to be larger, so body size again varies by latitude. And it has to do with the surface area to volume ratio. Surface area is a cubic term. Okay, you should bring your dry erase one.
I did.
Oh, wait. No, I can't remember. You can remind me.
That black one.
So surface area is a cubic term, and volume, or sorry, is a square term, and volume is a cubic term. So we can do the math real simply. 2 squared equals 4. What's 2 cubed?
8.
8. And then, if you want it, if we'll do a bigger number, okay? It's just a simple math trick. 5 times 25 is 125. Okay, so from 2, if you use 2 as your base number, you go from 4 to 8. It's a doubling effect. You go from 2 to 5, it's 25 to 125. If we do 10, it's even larger. So the bigger the number, the bigger the gulf between surface area and volume. And so your larger size ends up having a lower surface area to volume ratio. So you lose less heat. Okay? If your bigger animals, denser animals, hold heat better than small, skinny animals.
But it's still the same species, they just...
It can be the same species or within groups of species. Okay, so where, I'll give you an example. Where do you find the largest body size, the largest populations of grizzly bears? Kodiak Island, okay? Northern Alaska. The further north you get, the bigger the body size you get with grizzly bears. There's approximate and an ultimate explanation for that. The ultimate explanation is Bergman's rule. The more approximate explanation is bigger body size begets bigger body size. So once you sort of have gone down that direction, you're reproducing individuals that already have larger body size, so it keeps creating larger body individuals.
Bigger and
Just isolate.
Yes, right.
Anyone can walk in.
So I get what we're saying here, and I get the math there, bigger numbers, bigger spread,
Right.
I'm losing the connection.
Okay, so
Nice people know.
Smaller numbers means smaller surface area. So a mouse. Bigger numbers, bigger surface area. A bear. Okay? So what we're saying, the larger surface area to volume ratio, you have if you have more dense body, bigger body, you lose less heat.
Chemistry, the more particles there are, less more surface area. If you got one giant particle, it doesn't react quickly.
Take the skinniest person in this room, probably you, smallest person in this room. You're probably the coldest person in here, aren't you? You're cold all the time. Yeah. So little people with the surface area volume ratio closer to each other tend to lose heat more rapidly. People with a denser core tend to retain heat more readily. I mean, you can see this. You can see this in humans very easily. What is the bears? What is the largest species of bear? Polar bears. Polar bears are the largest species of bears. So we can look across taxa, like within bears. The largest individuals are going to tend to be in more temperate zones. The smaller individuals are going to tend to be more tropical.
So polar bears are the largest.
Polar bears are the largest bears of all bears, yes.
What's the smallest bear?
The smallest bear,
Some bears.
now the koala is an interesting one. So the koala is not actually a bear. So the koala is a marsupial. So it's completely unrelated to bears.
Some bears.
It's more closely related to a kangaroo, actually. Black bear is probably the smallest.
An anteater?
Not a bear.
No, it's not bear, what is that? It's a marsupial?
No, it's not marsupial. It's related to, there's a whole group of mammals, anteaters, pangolins that are.
You said pangolin?
Pangolin. That's basically it's an Asian anteater.
It has scales.
It has scales. Yeah, it's an ancient sort of. It's a weird looking animal, very weird looking animal.
Hangman is the best animal to use. No one else.
Smallest bear. That's a good question. Black bear is probably in there. Sun bears are fairly small. Actually, sun bear is an interesting. I have an interesting
It's some
history.
bears, look it up.
It is sun bears. I have an interesting history with sun bears. So, when I was a master's student at Oklahoma State University, they had in the zoology department in the basement was the vertebrate museum, and the vertebrate museum had a freezer. And my major professor was the curator of the museum. So, that semester I was on a museum assistantship. So they had an endowment for the museum, and one graduate student every semester would be in charge of sort of keeping track of the museum. And over Christmas break, I get a call from my advisors that you got to get up to school right now. We've got an emergency in the basement. So I walk in the building, and it smells like, it is the worst smell I've ever smelled in my life. And that's on the first floor. So I go downstairs to the basement, and the freezer to the museum had gone out. And probably had been out for 2 weeks. Inside of that museum was all of the frogs and cats and everything that had been dissected that semester. They hadn't been yet to be discarded. There was one of the graduate students was doing a parasite study of deer guts, and he had gone to a military base and collected all of the deer, like probably 80 garbage bags of deer guts.
On a military?
On a military base at Fort Sill and McAllister. Brought them back to Stillwater, and they were in that freezer. Yeah, they were hunted. It had been that fall, like in November, during deer season, they had killed them, and at the check station, they took all the guts and brought them back to Stillwater. The Tulsa Zoo had just donated a mandrill head and a full sun bear. It was all soup. And me and my fellow graduate students had to carry all of this stuff upstairs to a truck so they could go be incinerated. That sun bear was the smell, and just trying to wrestle. I mean, it's the smallest bear, but it's not very small whenever it's been decomposing for 2 weeks. and you can feel the flesh like sloughing off of it inside of the bag that it's in. And the juice is like dripping out of the bag all over our clothes. It was, I don't know how I survived. It was bad. The deer guts were the worst though. I mean, they were completely liquefied. Right? And
And within how many weeks?
about 2 weeks. It was the end of Christmas break. We don't know when the freezer went out. Oh, it was horrifying. The deer guts were just beyond. You know what guts smell like anyway. When they're fresh, they're bad.
Right.
But when they've been sitting for, and it was everything. It was the liver, because they were looking for liver flukes, and they were looking for gut parasites. So it was the colon, the entire intestine, and the stomach. Oh my God, it was just, and the heart and the lungs. They're looking for parasites in all different organs. So, okay. There are a lot of exceptions to Bergman's rule, as you might expect. Coyotes don't follow the rule. These are exceptions to Bergman's rule. Some foxes follow Bergman's rule, others do not. Anyone have an idea of why some species might not follow Bergman's rule? Yes, you did it. Fur and feathers. Okay, it's a trait to increase body size. There's a cost. It takes more food to feed a bigger individual. So it may be more energetically favorable to increase the number of feathers or the amount of fur in northern climates than to increase body size. So for some species, especially when you're talking about polar regions where resources are very limited, polar bears, they're on the endangered species list. Partly because of climate change, but that's sort of the ultimate explanation. The more proximate explanation is it takes so much food to keep a big polar bear alive. And so as polar ice is melting, they have to swim and search farther and farther for food. So a lot of them are starving to death. So polar bears are great evidence that Bergman's rule is fairly inefficient. Natural selection has favored polar bears to be larger, which falls in line with Bergman's rule. But you change the climate a little bit, and all of a sudden that large body size becomes a very costly, inefficient adaptation. The Disney movie, I'm picking on Disney again. The Planet Earth movie, did you guys see that one? So the Planet Earth one, it follows several animal storylines. But one of the storylines that it follows is a family of polar bears. And they keep going back and forth between it and other stories. But throughout the movie, you get to watch the daddy polar bear. This movie starts with the mom and the babies waking up from hibernation and the dad leaving. And the movie follows the dad as he slowly starves to death and dies.
Oh my gosh. What is it called?
Planet Earth.
I'm not gonna let my little.
What's not a documentary?
It is a documentary. Yeah, it is. But yeah, at the end of it starts with the polar bears emerging from hibernation, and it ends with daddy polar bear dying,
That one I'm thinking of.
starving to death. And it's sad because the end of it is desperately, he's starving to death. And so he tries to go after elephant seals because that's all the food that he almost drowns trying to swim between the polar ice. And when he finally gets on land, the only food available is these giant elephant seals. And he's not able to take them down. Or was it walruses? I don't remember. Maybe walruses. Either way, it was a really... they eat seals and things like that, smaller bodied animals. It was a big bodied animal that was trying to take down, and they easily dispatched this poor starving polar bear.
Would he be able to if he was healthy?
Maybe, but they were a big. It was a big pack. It was a small ice floe, and you had a whole pack. It was either walruses or elephant seals, one or the other. I don't remember which, but either way, it was very difficult because they were multiples of them beating up on him. They're better at isolating individual seals, like you see at SeaWorld, and dispatching of them in the water, especially. They're very efficient and they'll drown them. But on a piece of ice that's full of walruses, really, even a big male polar bear probably doesn't stand a whole lot of chance. Might be able to isolate a baby and kill a baby, but those big, 2,000-pound animals, no chance. Allen's rule is another biogeographical rule. It has to do with appendage length. It's awfully convenient that these rules, often the first letter is associated with the characteristic. So Allen's rule is for appendages. It's an easy way for you to remember it. So for endothermic vertebrates, this is not the case for insects, for example. Hotter environments tend to have longer appendages. Shorter appendages promote heat conservation. Long appendages increase surface area and facilitate heat dissipation. So if you look, for example, camels have very long legs. Desert rabbits have very long ears. Elephants, very large ears in the tropics. What about Asian elephants? What's the difference between African elephant and Asian elephant?
They are bigger Africans, or bigger, or wilder, or more aggressive.
They're more aggressive, yes.
Ears.
What about from a morphological standpoint? Ears. The ears are the most noticeable. So the ears are much larger in Africa than they are in the Asian elephants. Asian elephants have very small ears. But yeah, you're right. There's a difference in aggression, body size, and various other characteristics. But the ears are probably the most obvious first thing that you notice. So Asian elephants, because of the aggressiveness, Asian elephants have been able to be domesticated. In India, they've used Asian elephants for moving stuff and various as a work animal, not in Africa. And a lot of it has to do with, we'll come back to this later on. Very few, there are almost no savanna animals that have been domesticated. Basically none. They've tried to domesticate zebras. If you ever watch a movie of a Disney movie with a zebra that kicks field goals, it's not a zebra. It's a horse. Zebras are too nasty and vile to be domesticated.
There's this safari in San Antonio, and when you go to the doctor or the zebra exhibit, they say keep your hands inside, because you'd see them coming in the windows and kind of bite people.
Oh, I have a story about
They're so mean.
they're really nasty. The other thing that's really nasty, I have to tell my story now. So, when I was a kid, they had, I need a chair to tell stories. I can't stand it. So when I was a kid, there was this place called Arbuckle Wilderness. It was in Arbuckle Mountains in Oklahoma, right on 535. And this was early 80s, so they were less safety conscious, I think, at the time. They've changed. Their rules are a lot different now than they were then. But back then you paid by the carload. So each vehicle was one price. So you put as many people in the vehicle as you could to go through there. And they gave you these, the giant popcorn buckets you get at the movies that you can get refilled? They'd give you could buy a bucket of feed.
They still have the little tractor safaris?
You could still buy food for some of them?
I think they have one in College Station.
Okay.
Yeah, the San Antonio one has little paper bags full of food.
Okay. Well, you'll have to tell me if the story lines up. So I bet you they've changed the regulations a little bit from when I was a kid. So when we were little, when they first opened, my parents took us, and me and my cousins were in the back of the pickup, riding through the safari, and we had the bucket of feed. The first animals that we came to were the zebras. Or not the zebras, sorry, the giraffes. The giraffes are really cool. They were really friendly. They would, stick their long neck down and very gently eat out of your bucket. And that was really cool. And then we drove a little further, and we saw these creatures stand up, look around, take off running towards our truck. And they these were the ostriches. They tried to climb in the truck with us. They took our bucket of feed and ripped it out of our hands. We were screaming bloody murder. My parents we were trying to get them to pull us into the truck with them, but my parents were they didn't want the giraffe or the ostriches in with them, so they kind of had the windows half rolled down. They were trying to pull us through a half rolled down window. We were like screaming, roll the window down, roll the window down. I bet you the ostriches they keep away from the kids.
Yeah, they're fenced in.
Yeah.
I hate ostriches. It's
So
scary.
I mean, it gives you that it's that full Jurassic Park Velociraptor kind of feeling. When I watched Jurassic Park, I think it came out when I was in high school, it terrified me because it brought back the Velociraptors chasing them, brought back childhood memories of the ostriches trying to pull us out of the back of the truck.
Well, they had these golf cart things that were like enclosed, like caged, and then if the ostriches would like get too close, like they would bump into the ostriches with the golf carts and like chase them off.
To keep them from getting. Yeah, there's too many kids that like me that were traumatized by these drive-through safaris by the ostriches. My God.
Have you ever ate their eggs?
No, I have not eaten ostrich eggs. My in-laws, back when ostriches first, people started farming them, my in-laws bought an ostrich egg. They paid a lot of money for it, and it didn't end up. They bought the
Did
egg.
you eat it?
Oh no, I haven't eaten it. No.
Oh.
Have you?
Yeah.
Is it good?
It's not bad. There's a lot of meat. I mean, they're so
Yeah.
big, so it's like
Is it kind of strong? I would think it would be kind of sulfury.
not very good.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
No.
Quail eggs I like. Quail eggs are delicious.
It's probably the weirdest
Hmm?
thing. They're so tiny.
They're tiny. Yeah. They're hard to cook. You have to cook them sunny side up,
Yeah.
and you have to cook them really fast. But they're good, like on top of a hamburger or something.
Where can you get them from? Just go out and get them yourself?
There are places you can buy them. You'd have to go to Dallas probably, someplace like that. A lot of people farm quail, and so that's the best way to get it. You have to find someone that farms quail to buy quail eggs from. There's a quail farmer in White House, and so I've gotten quail egg, a dozen or so quail eggs at a time from him, but it's been a while.
Are they better than regular eggs?
They're, I think the smaller the egg, the less sulfury it tastes.
Okay.
So it's almost have you had quail eggs? They're almost kind of sweet. They have a real soft, real delicate flavor.
Yeah.
They're not very eggy, I guess. The bigger the egg, usually the more eggy it tastes. They don't taste well. I don't know, maybe it's they're lower. Yeah, it's a very tiny, tiny yolk. Bloger's rule concerns this one. The G doesn't correlate with anything in the definitions, so that's just remember this one. Darker colors occur in more humid environments. But there are alternate explanations. For example, polar bears are thought to be lighter colored from crypsis. But what's the problem with this explanation? What would a polar bear need to hide from? It is an apex predator.
Oh, prey. Prey.
So that would, right. So if there's no predation threat, then the reason for crypsis would be so that it can be hidden from whatever it's trying to hunt.
What is crypsis?
Crypsis would be camouflage.
I
I heard that polar bear actually they're black, their hair is not white.
Yeah, their skin is dark, their hairs are white. Yeah, they're very hairy because they live in polar environments, so you don't see their skin at all.
It's pure camouflage.
That's the hypothesis anyway. When you look at peninsulas in biogeography, you also tend to see an effect. Species richness tends to decrease from the continent interior towards the terminus of the peninsula. And this pattern takes the hold for plants, for invertebrates, for vertebrates, in a variety of different peninsulas. So you see this in Florida, you see this in Baja California. I like the ostriches. I have a hard time with eggs.
Yeah, but
I did something really dumb when I was in graduate school. Something today for stories. I got into chiggers really bad. Like thousands of chigger bites. We'd sit down in the grass and eat our lunch when we were doing field work. I had them every place you would not want chiggers. My ankles were covered in chiggers, my waistband was covered. I never had them. I've gotten chiggers many times. This is the worst I ever had them. We were desperate, and we still had days of field work left. And we couldn't. I didn't sleep the night before. It was just awful. And someone had a sock they had filled with sulfur. They had it on their ankles and on their waist. And so first thing we did is we sprayed all of our clothes with permanent, which is like a military grade pesticide that you're not supposed to let directly come in contact with your skin. So we sprayed it on our clothes and put that on. It probably took 10 years off my life. And then we patted the sulfur on us, and the girl that had the sulfur said, you know, I heard that if you take a teaspoon of sulfur and you eat it, that the chiggers won't bother you at all. Well, me and my buddy that had chiggers really bad, we were desperate enough, we said, okay, we'll try that. So we each grabbed a teaspoon and we dipped out a teaspoon of sulfur and we ate it. The first thing that happened is all of the moisture was whipped out of my mouth and out of my throat. We both had to run. We were taking turns in the sink trying to wash the sulfur down. It tasted like rotten eggs. It was a horrible, horrible taste. And then all day long, we sweat yellow. Our shirts were permanently stained yellow from sweating the sulfur through our skin. We smelled like rotten, festering eggs all day, and I was nauseous the entire day. I think my liver was half destroyed by that specific event. To this day, if I walk into a house and people in boiling eggs, it sets off my gag reflex.
Chigger fucking?
The chiggers didn't touch us.
Cholesterol.
Our wives wouldn't touch us, the chiggers wouldn't touch us, no one wanted anything to do with us. They made us ride in the back of the truck. It was bad. All right, so the explanation for the peninsula effect has to do with island-like nature of peninsulas. So peninsulas are isolated. The further you get down the peninsula, the only connection you have is back north. Okay, there's no east-west connection. Eventually you run out of south connection too. So you get more and more isolated as you go down the peninsula. Area becomes smaller. The climate in most peninsulas tend to be more maritime. It's kind of marine climate. And so habitat eventually becomes very limited as you move further and further down the peninsula. We're going to come back to this when we talk about island biogeography. But as you go further down the peninsula, the rate of immigration, rate of new individuals colonizing becomes low, and the rate of extinction becomes high with isolation. As the peninsula gets larger, you tend to find high endemicity. Endemicity means you find it there and nowhere else in the world. Endemic.
Yes, the drive-through supplies aren't any safe now than they used to be.
They're not any safer now.
I found a picture last night. I found a picture of a friend, and she's being bit by a camel.
Camels are pretty nasty too. They put some nasty creatures in some of those drive-through spots. The zebras and the ostriches in particular are the nastiest, I think. Camels also spit. But they have been domesticated. I mean, they can be tamed. Most of your savanna creatures, things like zebras, they're just not tameable. They are too many. It's an evolutionary. When we talk about savannas, it's a very old ecosystem with lots of predators, and so most of your food species have a trigger, a really fine hair trigger, like zebras, and they just are not tameable. So the last gradient we'll talk about, and we'll finish here today. Next time I promise dinosaurs. We're going to talk about history of the Earth next time. If you look at elevation gradient, what you tend to find, you look at diversity versus elevation. Tend to find a pattern like this. Okay. At intermediate elevations, you tend to have high diversity. At really high elevations, that diversity is going to decline steeply. So when you get to the top of a mountain, species diversity is very low. And those high mountains, you're talking about like Mount Ararat or any of the really tall mountains, we talked about this back early in the semester. You can go through kind of a Mount Ararat's really an interesting one because it's set in a desert environment. It's the only green that you see in that landscape is as you move up Mount Ararat. So partway up Mount Ararat is some of the highest diversity in that region in Turkey because you have green actually. So you have other animals that are adapted to the plants that are there. So you kind of get a unique environment. Then as you go further up, you start to get towards the snow cap. That diversity is going to decline and go way down. So as your elevation increases, your air temperature and your air pressure decreases. Cooler air holds less moisture, so precipitation is going to increase. This is why you get a rain zone at like Mount Ararat, for example. But as the elevation gets higher, that precipitation freezes. You get the snow cap, and then it's unavailable to most organisms. So at intermediate elevations, halfway up Mount Ararat, you have an optimal combination of temperature, gases, and precipitation to promote diversity. And the last point I want to make, Robert MacArthur has done a lot of work. He's a biogeographer that specializes on working with small mammals, and he's at the University of New Mexico. So he's worked a lot in mountain ranges in the Rockies on small mammals. And what you find is that what he argued is that mountain ecosystems can be viewed as archipelagos. Everyone knows what an archipelago is? An archipelago is a series of islands in a chain coming off of a mainland. And you see, when we talk about island biogeography, we'll look at this. But in archipelagos, you tend to find similar species on the to the mainland, and then the islands are going to have similar species. And it's going to get less similar to the mainland as you move further down the archipelago. But anyway, what you find is similar species on individual mountains. I'll give you one interesting example. So the Grand Canyon, the Colorado River carved the Grand Canyon, and when it did that, it isolated. Let's see, their antelope squirrels. So there's two species of antelope squirrels. Depending on which side of the Grand Canyon you're on, there are two different species. The Colorado River and the Grand Canyon isolated two populations of antelope squirrels, and it's a fairly recent speciation. We call them sister species. Sister species are two species that are in the process of, you can actually see them in the process of evolving, from separating. It's allopatric speciation. And there are many examples of sister species that we can observe in nature, where they're closely related. They used to be connected populations. Something has isolated them, and you're seeing allopatric speciation actually happening. I actually am studying, if any of you know Laramie, John Plasick, and my graduate student that we share. Laramie is studying an example of basically this phenomenon. There's two species. It's historically been called one species of painted crayfish, and it occurs in Cypress Creek, and it occurs in the Kisatchie Bayou in Louisiana. And there's probably 100 miles separating the two isolated populations of this painted crayfish. What she's found so far is that the Texas population is something like 10%, 8 to 10% deviated from the Louisiana population in terms of mitochondrial DNA. We're about 2% different than chimpanzees in mitochondrial DNA. So these isolated populations are probably different species. They're probably in the process of speciating. And it's an interesting biogeographical story because at one time they were connected. If you look at the Red River, back in as far back as the Caddo Indians were recording history, the Red River was backed up into Louisiana and into Texas, into East Texas. In the 1800s, you couldn't pass through, navigational-wise, through Shreveport. You could actually walk, or people were in early descriptions of explorers settling Louisiana, you could walk across the Red River in Shreveport. There was such a huge log jam. It was, I don't remember how many miles long, but it was like 20, 30 miles long log jam through Louisiana on the Red River. When in the mid-1800s, a guy named Shreve, an engineer, started the process of busting that log jam up. And when he busted through that log jam, they named the city, because you could now navigate through the Red River, they named it Shreveport. That's where it gets its name. And when that happened, it drained most of the land in East Texas and western Louisiana that was flooded. What was left was Caddo Lake. So Caddo Lake actually formed in the 1800s when they busted through the Red River. But it was continuous water from Caddo Lake all the way to the Red River and into western Louisiana. And in the 1800s, when they separated them, it isolated these two populations of painted crayfish. There's also a minnow, bluehead shiner, that has the exact same distribution as the painted crayfish. And I have another student that's finishing out, Justin Hernandez, that his thesis was on the bluehead shiner. He's already taking the job. I think most of you have seen Laramie here, know who she is. All right, we're going to stop here for now, and we'll pick up with ancient geology. See you on Friday.